All right. Thanks, Karthik. I will waste 1 minute. So the talk will be about this value revenue paradox. It's a fairly small talk. So I'm going to waste 1 minute talking about something else I'm doing, which I know a lot of my academic colleagues will be interested in. So in my editorial positions, we've been looking at, I was one of the people who set up the policy for authors, AI policy for AI use for authors. But I think we have a huge problem coming up at the journal level. And so we have a really cool piece of work and a paper on what journals have to do to adopt AI. And it's going against the direction of what most journals are doing. So I want to spread the news. I'd love to chat with you guys about that at some point. All right? Okay. So this paper is, like I said, about this small paradox that we're observing in how firms are pricing AI products. And as you might know, for software, there are many pricing models, but one of the most common ones for enterprise software is a per use or seat-based pricing, right? And you see it all over the place in a variety of examples. And not surprisingly, when AI products started getting released, many firms have adopted a similar model. We pay about $20 a month for ChatGPT, and this is about ChatGPT Team, GitHub, Copilot, Salesforce. A lot of these products are sold to enterprises at per seat pricing schemes. And what that does is, for traditional software, it worked pretty well. And one of the things when you're designing a pricing model is, for a large market, you want some kind of alignment that customers that receive high value pay more, right? That's what most pricing schemes try to do. And it's worked pretty well for software pricing in the past. Now with AI products, of course, one of the things we talk about a lot is replacing human workforce through increase in productivity, but also being able to do the same work that humans did. And in many cases, firms are talking about very large productivity gains in coding, customer service, contact jobs, many other paralegals, like many jobs are going to be fundamentally downsized. And in those circumstances, we look at seat-based pricing as creating a potential paradox that firms that get more value will pay less because they have fewer workers. But the paradox is actually a little deeper than that, and that's what I'm going to try to explain. All right? So yeah, greater headcount reduction means you have fewer people left to use the AI. Unlike when you use Word or EMR technologies, you don't cut the number of doctors because doctors have adopted electronic medical record systems, right? So that's really one of the differences as we move towards AI. So these are the questions we're asking. Is there this alignment between value created and price paid? When does it occur and not? And what can we do about it, right? Because this is, pricing schemes are chosen for a number of reasons. It's simplicity, it's market entry. So how do we do as we mature in this industry? Sorry, did I jump? Yeah. So I'm not going to go through all of the model, and there's too much notation. It's a very, very small model, and it still gets too much for 10 minutes. But basically, the idea is if you think of a customer base of an AI vendor, there are lots of firms. These firms vary in the size of the number of employees they have who might use AI. But also they vary on their ability to leverage AI. So one firm might say, we'll adopt the AI, but we won't replace humans, right? Another might say, we're going to go cutthroat and downsize and get as much cost savings as we can, and those are different directions. And let's imagine the vendor is setting a per seat price, meaning the number of humans that are left to use the AI are the ones who are paying for it. And then there are other things we won't worry about. But yeah, one other factor that matters is this parameter omega, which is the inherent capability of the AI to be able to deliver the results, right? So a higher omega AI product will actually cause greater headcount reduction across all the firms, right? But within this set of firms, it may be different amounts. So we can then think of what firms would be willing to pay this per seat price to adopt AI, and that's simply a comparison of the value they receive and the price they pay. So there's among all the market size, some people will adopt, some will not adopt, so that's fine. And then it's pretty obvious, like I said before, that because it's pegged to the number of users. Firms that cut headcount more, suppose you have two firms with 10,000 employees, one cuts more, one cuts less. The one that cuts more saved more human salaries, right? And pays less. And that's the basic element of the paradox, but we're going to go beyond that. You can think of the profit of the vendor. So that's, across all the firms that adopt and how many employees they have that are using the product. And that's their overall revenue, and maybe minus some cost, you get a profit. You figure out an optimal price to offer. It doesn't really matter whether this paradox applies to whatever price you might offer. It need not be the optimal price, right? So we know that, so this parameter V is that capability of a user firm to leverage the AI to gain the benefits from it, right? So firms that have high V will save more and have fewer seats, right? Now it turns out this is fine if the headcount reduction of AI is relatively small. So this omega scale is between 0 and 1. 1 would mean you fired all your employees, right? That's not happening most of the time. 0 would mean none. And it turns out this paradox at a higher level that I'm going to talk about only applies when your headcount reduction capability is on the higher end. Now, in this particular model, it'll be somewhere around 0.6, but that needs to be generalized. But the point is the paradox does not emerge in the context of traditional software products that also can reduce headcount. But they usually do not reduce headcount as substantially as many of the AI tools are promising to do, all right? So what happens when you have a high omega AI, right, is that I'm just going to show you one or two pictures and leave you with that. So that's the lower two graphs over here. So basically firms that are getting some amount of value and how much they are paying, right? Now remember I told you firms are different on two dimensions, the number of employees they have or started with, and their ability to leverage AI. So the value they get is the product of the two, the headcount reduction, right? And then the size of the firm. So at any point V, any value here, there are many, many firms who are getting that much value, $3 million a year saved due to AI, right? There are lots of firms. So the firms, that's where the paradox emerges, that as you start climbing up the value curve, you would expect firms to pay more. And yet, when we get to the firms that are getting really high value, at some point this payment decreases because of the incredible headcount reduction that AI is delivering. And that paradox, which you see in the bottom two curves, does not occur if the omega is small enough, or the capability to leverage the headcount reduction is not terribly high. And this is fundamentally, the point I was making earlier about traditional software products, were meant to be used and improve, efficiency, productivity, and all of that. And in some cases have headcount reductions, but generally small headcount reductions. And now we are looking at AI technologies that deliver very large headcount reductions. This is simply a version of that picture fully filled out, across everything. So every dot here would be a firm. And so the paradox would be that a firm like this, which has high value, firm 1, pays less than firm 2. And there are lots and lots of these firm 1, firm 2 pairs that occur in this picture. And the previous pictures were basically aggregations of those. So that's the paradox, really, that it's not just at the individual firm level, but at the large market level. This kind of paradox would emerge in terms of the AI vendors' ability to monetize the product. And so what that means is, further, if I'm developing a product that can have a certain omega, right? It can, for multiple firms, it can create a headcount reduction of somewhere between 10 and 30%. But if I can improve my omega that 3 times, that may go from 10 to 30% to 30 to 90%. Should I do that? Because that will affect, I may increase the price for it, right? But the paradox might get even worse in that case. So the broader question here is, we think of a lot of AI many types of AI substitution technologies. I mean, we can always talk about augmentation, but there is definitely also replacement, right? Substitution that is happening. And so for these substitution technologies, firms might want to think about different pricing models than what this the sort of obvious thing to adopt has been the seat-based pricing. There are many alternatives. And again, as I said before, the choice of a pricing scheme is not purely driven by profit maximization. There are many other factors that come in. But I think it's time to think about that future and what other methods might apply. We can put token pricing as one way to address the seat-based pricing paradox. It will probably create other problems as well. You can tie payments to outcomes. That would be a better alignment of value and payment if you can design methods to audit and all of that. So I think they should stop here and actually have time for questions. So, yeah. Go ahead.
How do you take into account increased productivity of performance? Because in this model, you take only headcounts and automation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the argument I gave you was at a more status quo level, that firms are not going to create new products, expand their market, go into new markets, right? That can certainly happen, right, because of their productivity gains. But we've done a little preliminary analysis. The paradox will not go away. So you might definitely, a firm with 100,000 employees that was able to downsize to 20,000 may then expand into new things and actually double their scale and maybe end up with 40,000 or 80,000 employees, right? But that does not make the fundamental paradox go away, that firms that get even better gains are paying less. They may ultimately pay more because they expanded, but that doesn't change the point. Yeah.
Go back one slide.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So can you elaborate on
Yeah.
profit sharing?
Yeah, I mean, this would be some kind of contract where you go into a firm and say, look, I promise you will, or you will achieve, we don't know how much you will achieve, but I will tie my payment to the outcome that I deliver. This has been happening with technology products for a long time. It's been called performance-based pricing, contingent pricing. I mean, the simplest way to understand about it might be how when search advertising came in, and it was cost per click rather than the traditional cost per impression. Clicks are a measure of performance or value delivered. And later it became cost per action, cost per sales, all of those things. So that's the idea. Yes.
So just on that, Hemant, it makes sense, especially as we move towards like agentic types of implementations, where there may not be a human counterpart.
Absolutely, right?
So,
yeah.
And it almost feels like it has to move towards outcome-based pricing when the agents are doing.
Or token-based pricing sometimes, because even agents are going, so they're basically the idea is the more work you do, the more I can charge you, right? But it doesn't mean you're getting more value necessarily. But
yeah, but I feel like part of the value proposition of the agents is that they can get stuff done efficiently.
yeah,
So focusing on the tokens.
actually, you're right.
gives
You're
out
right.
So
You are
I
right.
almost feel like the big challenge with agents is going to be how do you do attribution of value?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. The better I'm using agents, the less tokens I'm running, and I would pay less. And so that again would create the paradox. So I think this is why we got excited about this topic. And in some cases, token-based pricing may solve the paradox, but other times it won't. And so maybe this outcome-based pricing is really the way to go. But we all know that requires various things to measurement and agreement and trust. But again, it's something for the industry to think about, because naively adopting seat-based pricing, because that's what we did in the last 30 years for other software products, does not cut it. Yeah.
Sorry,
No.
So based on what I observed from Hemant, so their rule is if your user base exceeding 700 millions per month, like they started to
Absolutely.
getting us
Absolutely. Yeah.
customized.
Absolutely.
So will that again introduce the paradox you mentioned?
Yeah, so you're right. So, I presented this very simplistic setting where I said there's only one price P in the whole market. Of course, you will create groups, segments with different prices, but that will not make the paradox go away within segments, right? It will still persist inside the segments. And also, I presented seed-based pricing as a simple, you post a price and everybody pays that price. Of course, we know with a lot of technology products, vendors will have private price discrimination. But to me, that's something to think about, that as you go and privately negotiate the discounts, is that going to resolve the paradox or make it even worse? That firms that are more competent, well, they extract, because even in seed-based pricing for software that happens, the biggest firms end up getting the deepest discounts, So we did not, for 10 minutes, I did not want to bring in all of those complexities. But yes, that is something we are thinking about to see whether, if you were to think of a more rich operational setting, I think the paradox still persists, and we just have to prove it more carefully. Yeah. Yes?
What does it mean for the enterprise who are actually considering this technology? Because it's a trade-off.
That's a great point. Yeah, so firms will be driven harder to do headcount reduction if the pricing model is seed-based. If I'm paying for every user who's on the contract, I would be incentivized to have fewer users.
I was talking about the future value. Like if you had retained those folks and they had delivered much more than they were doing today.
Yeah. No, that's the answer I gave in response to the earlier question, that yes, firms would certainly want to do that if their market conditions would allow them to do it. But the paradox would not go away in those settings either. Yeah. All right. I think we're good. Thank you.